This is Fresh Tracks Weekly. It's another busy week, similar to last, just trying to get everything in line for the upcoming season. Yeah, just a little bit of a whirlwind, but I did manage to go get a quick shoot in at the Total Archery Challenge this weekend, hung out with some great people, and then got a quick overnighter backpack trip in. Caught a few grayling, we got some good exercise. I'm starting to feel pretty good about getting my mountain legs for the season, so that's good. Randy has been working all week on some cool stuff with outdoor class. He also just released a podcast on Hunt Talk Radio about the Mexican wolf recovery. We talked a bit about that on a past episode of Fresh Tracks Weekly, but if you want a really deep dive, you should listen to this podcast with Jim Heffelfinger and get a really good background on the whole situation on Mexican wolves. Now, let's head over to Michael's Fishing Corner.
Welcome back to the Fishing Corner. It's been a couple weeks. Just to give you a quick rundown, last week I was officiating my roommates, well, actually both my roommates getting married together. They are a male and a female. Been fishing a bunch, 127 days of fishing in 2022. Been tying a bunch of flies when I can't get out, but it's been super warm. Some of the rivers around here in southwest Montana are going on hoot owl, which means you can't fish after 2 p.m. The river temperature levels go up throughout the afternoon and then start to decline about 9, 10 at night once it's been dark for a few hours. But anyways, been fishing the creek, and I've really been obsessed with like filming dry fly eats in slow motion. Went to the Missouri a few weeks ago and just like found myself filming a lot more than I did fishing of the trico hatch. The trico hatch on the Missouri, if you've never heard of it, they're these tiny little bugs, and they hatch in the morning, and they have a spinner fall around 9 a.m., and all these flies hit the water, and the trout go crazy for about 4 hours. And I kid you not, like the surface of the water will just be covered in trico spinner fall. It's insane. Last weekend, my buddy Colin was in town for the Total Archery Challenge. We floated the Madison, and we caught the smallest fish I've ever caught on the Madison. Thanks for tuning into the Fishing Corner this year, and we'll see you on the next one. Who knows when it'll be? Back to you, Marcus.
With that, let's jump into some news. I did mention this once in the past about the Mountain Elk Foundation's interactive article on the Minam, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, the Minam River property acquisition in Oregon. It's been this huge collaborative process that's ongoing to purchase and convey several chunks of property to the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. The reason I bring it back up, though, is Mountain Elk Foundation just released a short film telling the story, including how they are improving the land that they already have with volunteer labor. Stories like this are pretty cool, but the story is also not complete. They're still working on phase 2, hoping to block up this entire chunk of property. Really cool project. I'm going to link to this video in the description below. Check it out. Super cool stuff. In Idaho, 23,000 acres of public land is now open to sportsmen access again after being off limits for 85 years. The Myrtle Creek Preserve was closed to hunting, fishing, trapping in the 1930s to protect wildlife from overharvest and to protect the water quality, as it was also the drainage that fed the municipal water supply to the town below. But now, with modern hunting regulations and the acceptance that sportsman activities don't jeopardize the water supply, the Fish and Game Commission made the decision to open it back up. It's a mixture of Forest Service and state lands. It has some cool old burns and some forested lands in which a number of game species occupy, along with several creeks with a variety of trout species. Interestingly, Idaho had 33 of these game preserves that had been closed to sportsmen at one point in time. It seems, though, the historic reasoning for restricting them at the time largely no longer applies, as today only 3 of those preserves still remain closed to all sportsman access. Arizona Game and Fish just released a clarification and changes to the non-permit over-the-counter archery deer hunts. We mentioned this in the past episode, but starting this hunting season, Arizona will have harvest quota for both mule and coos deer in units historically that had been unlimited. All over-the-counter archery deer hunters will be required to report either by a website survey or calling a phone number. The quotas will be both unit and species specific, and once that quota is met, it will be closed down until the following season. They also announced starting as the 2023 calendar year, non-residents to Arizona will be limited on the archery over-the-counter tags. It is yet to be clarified what that number is and how it will be limited, whether it's a first-come, first-served system or if there will be a drawing. The Wyoming Game and Fish Department just released their annual habitat plan report that shows the various projects that they worked on with partners to improve habitat for both fish and wildlife. This year it was over $10.5 million that went to accomplishing their goals. Now, before your eyes just glaze over and you think, okay, whatever, X number of dollars towards X project, blah, 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 just hear me out. I realize that not everyone's a nerd that's interested in habitat improvement, but here's a hot tip on how you can use reports like this to gain information for your hunting or scouting purposes. By reading these reports, you see all these locations that have been handpicked by biologists and managers and identified for being a very important area where they want habitat improved. Better habitat means more and bigger wildlife, so if you want to shoot a big giant buck or bull, you can gain some pretty good insight by reading these reports on where they might be hanging out. It's kind of like taking your e-scouting to the next level. Also, it's really cool to see the breakdown of where all the funding comes from. You can see which organizations are putting money towards which causes, and kind of cool to just to see who's putting their money where their mouth is. In Montana, the Bureau of Land Management approved the American Prairie Reserve's proposal to graze bison on 63,000 acres of land. This has been a bit of a contentious topic, so Randy is going to jump in for this week's deeper dive. To start this off, I feel like we want to go into a little bit about like who the American Prairie Reserve is, or
aren't they now
like,
AP American Prairie?
American Prairie.
They got rid of reserve, I think.
Oh, well,
I think it's just
I
AP.
haven't been paying attention to the
But
material,
anyhow,
but
yeah.
private nonprofit.
They're a nonprofit group that is trying a bunch of experiments related to private land conservation.
Yep.
Which in Montana, we're 2/3 private land. So if we're going to continue the great private land legacy of conservation we have in Montana, a lot of that work is going to happen on private land.
Yeah, and so what they are doing, and they started to accumulate quite a bit of land, both deeded and then also they're leasing up public land leases, or grazing leases.
Right. When you buy the base acreage, you get the allotments that come with it.
Yep. Yeah, and so that was what's recently in the headlines. They got approved to graze 63,000 acres of BLM land with bison.
Right, with bison.
And which in the last 100 years, it's been with cattle. It's basically,
And in 2003, Montana, at the pressure of the livestock industry, said, we want to reclassify bison as livestock.
Yep.
So that opened the door for anybody who now has a grazing allotment. And I can say this because I'm the trustee of a ranch where we have a grazing allotment, so I'm pretty familiar with these things, okay?
Yeah.
That opened the door where you can apply to change your allotment to some other sort of livestock. Well, back when bison were considered wildlife and managed by Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, this wouldn't have been allowed because back then, bison weren't livestock.
Right.
So they changed the law in Montana, moved the management over to the Department of Livestock. So any leaseholder, not just American Prairie, could go to the BLM or the Forest Service and say, I want to change my stocking from cattle to another form of livestock. And that's what made the headlines, is now they're going to run bison instead of cattle.
Yeah, and so we'll go into that a little deeper later, but I guess just to rewind to the AP, I guess now, right? American Prairie. So they conserve for wildlife is one of their big missions, right? So they are not out to make profit off of their livestock on their land. They are conserving their land for wildlife, so they have a different mission than most private landowners in that area. Yeah. So it's a private bison herd that they're utilizing to do it. And like you said, they're classified as livestock now. So the big thing of why it's in the news is there's huge pushback from a lot of the local ranchers and some of the politicians and UPOM, United Property Owners in Montana. So there's trying to understand where that pushback's coming from. So what are their main, what's the big thing that you think is getting people fired up?
Well, I think if you're a rancher in Montana, you see the writing on the wall. I grew up in a little logging town where when the sawmill closed and all the logging went away, our little town went from 500 people to 200 people. So I completely understand the if you want to call it fear, the trepidation, the concern these people have. They're seeing their town shrink. They're seeing everything shrink. Their way of life that they've, for generations is being impacted. So I'm fully sympathetic with those people.
Yeah.
And then you think about the fact that some of them don't have kids who are going to take over the next generation.
Right.
Because the kids, they see what the future of small operation agriculture is, and they're like, I'm going to go somewhere else where I can make a living. And so if you don't have anyone to take it over, this is your retirement. This is what these families have worked generations, some of them over 100 years.
Yep.
This is all they have. So if they got to get out of it,
No, I get it.
They're going to sell.
You can, yeah.
I want them to sell. I hope they sell for billions. I want these people
Right.
who've scratched out a living for generations, I want them to get every penny they possibly can out of that place.
Yeah. And so, but I mean, to go back to like the UPOM's
Right.
big pushes, they have
Right.
these signs. If you drive through central Montana, you'll see these signs everywhere. It says,
Yeah.
save the cowboy, stop the APR.
Right.
And it's just like, they're arguing, and I just want to give it, like, I just think, I mean,
It's bullshit.
well,
It is. Let's call it what it is, Marcus. It's bullshit.
But here
United
they're-
Property Owners of Montana has zero interest in the poor dude who's worked his whole life and now doesn't have anybody to sell his ranch to. They're saying, oh, we shouldn't be allowed to sell to the highest bidder if the highest bidder is somebody who we don't like.
right. Yeah.
That's the biggest bunch of bullshit I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Okay, so UPOM says they're all about property rights. Okay, fine. Last time I checked, when you say you're about property rights, that means you're not trying to restrict who can come and buy someone else's property or who that person can sell to.
Right.
But that's what they do. They introduce bills in the legislature to say that nonprofits can't buy this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't piss down my neck and tell me it's raining.
There's definitely some irony in it.
No, Marcus, you're
I-
being too polite. It's not
I know,
irony,
I
it's
just-
bullshit.
I know, but it just like, I'm trying to like, give their arguing points, just
right.
bring them to light a little bit, because they're saying that it's shifting from agriculture away to tourism, or shifting
it
agriculture
is.
to tourism, which is kind of one of
It
the big
is.
things that they're doing. And so they're making the argument that it's less jobs. The APR's tax exempt status allows them to outbid.
all
So
right.
that's what. This is why I wanted to bring it up, because I know
no,
you.
I'm a
have
CPA. All right. UPOM, and we've kind of thrown this back at them, and when they see there's accountants in the room, they shut up on this. So Montana has these ag exemptions, and if you, as a landowner, haven't filed for an ag exemption, you should fire your attorney and fire your accountant. But I pay more property taxes on my spare lot next to my house than what most ranches pay in Montana, because they file an ag exemption. So for them to say this takes property off the tax rolls is bullshit.
Yeah. Okay. So.
I'm sorry. I'm just tired of all this stuff. It's smoke and mirrors, and it makes good headlines, and then you get a bunch of politicians who are going to run around and raise the flag.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of people saying that it's displacing the livestock industry and replacing it with a zoo from our attorney general, and then you had the governor questioning it, and Steve
Well,
Daines is questioning it. Everyone's questioning it, but it's this. So I just thought there's an irony in the fact that a lot of the people who will argue for free market,
Yeah, property rights, free market, everything
but
else.
not with this scenario.
Right, but
They
except
don't-
here.
They don't like the idea
Yeah.
of this, and so I thought it was the perk, it's oh my god, I'm gonna forget the name of it now. It's
PERC?
yeah, it's private
Oh, it's the Economic Environmental Research
Environmental
Center.
Research Center. What's the
Right.
first word? Private.
First
Private environment? No.
Property
Yes,
and Environmental
sorry.
Research
But
Center.
anyway.
It's a think tank here in Bozeman.
Right.
Great guys. Brian Yablonsky runs it, and they got a bunch of smart people. And I don't always agree with them on everything, but we can have really intellectual conversations and push back on this, and I enjoy that. PERC loves private land conservation.
Well,
they love market.
That's what I brought it up, is because they're quoted in a lot of the news articles, and they're the ones saying, like, well, this is the way that private land conservation should be done. It's the right approach. This is the right decision. So as this interesting seeing that, they're the ones who, to me, kind of pointed out some of the irony.
I'm with PERC on this. It's like,
Yeah.
if we're going to do private land conservation, we better have incentives, and we better not interfere with all this BS.
Right.
And what is UPOM and their policies they're trying to promote, they're trying to interfere with it. They've taken, we used to have a senator in Montana, Conrad Burns, old auctioneer, funny guy. You know, his humor was a little bit different, but Conrad one time said, well, it's only socialism or it's only whatever when it's the other guy. I think he said it's only pork when it's the other guy. Okay. Well, for UPOM, they must believe, well, it's only socialism when it's the other guy. When it's our idea.
Yeah. So, okay, let's calm down a little bit and we'll go to thinking from what American Prairie is doing from the hunter's perspective.
There we go.
So that's one thing that, I mean, we're hunters, that's what we like to think about, but so the land that they're buying up, they're managing it for high quality habitat, high quality wildlife, and a lot of it is open to hunters.
Public hunting.
So it's open access, and they're still collaborating with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks for the hunting stuff, but a lot of times they're restricting access to make a higher quality hunt and try to promote higher quality wildlife. So,
imagine that. Management.
Yeah, and so it's just, I think it's just important that we realize a lot of this land never used to be open to public access, and now it is.
A lot of these lands, if we get one day of public hunting, that's more public hunting than we were getting prior to AP buying it.
And the land was also previously not managed with wildlife in mind. So there's a good chance that you're going to grow more animals, bigger animals, have a higher quality hunting experience there. So yeah, I just think that's kind of an interesting take on it.
I can assure you that AP will come up with some things that I don't agree with. In fact, if I went through their stuff, I'm sure I could find some things that I disagree with.
Like most things.
But this part of it, this portion of them doing private land conservation, who am I to tell a private landowner what to do on their land? And I don't care if that private landowner is a corporation, a limited liability company, a sole proprietor, or a nonprofit group.
Yeah.
It's their land. They can do whatever they want with it.
Well, and we touched on it. You touched on it earlier about when you are even if you're a multi-generation rancher or whatever, and then maybe your kids don't want to take it over, there's no one that is near you that can really afford that land. I mean, you don't have a lot of options, and so there's right now in central Montana, at least as the example, there's two kind of groups of people buying it. And it's you got the American Prairie, or you have billionaires. You got the Wilkes brothers coming in, or whoever buying up these ranches, and it's just like, I guess, looking at, again, because I tend to look at things from a hunter's perspective or a recreationalist, it's like, which one of those two paths leads to the greatest good for the greatest number of people? And it's just like, well, you get hunting access, you can go recreate on that property a lot of the times of the year.
We really have two forks in the road for a seller. They can sell it to their neighbor who is running cows or doing dry land farming or whatever, and it would sell based on production value.
Right.
Well, the way the ag economy is, that production value is going to result in a very low number.
Yeah.
And it would be great if, Joe and Mary, who are having to sell because the kids aren't coming back, it'd be great if the production value of agriculture could compete with billionaires.
Right.
But it can't. So Joe and Mary are saying, neighbor, I'm sorry, but there's a bunch of billionaires over here and multimillionaires who would buy this for a lot more.
Yeah.
So I want Joe and Mary to sell to whoever's going to give them the most money. Now, if we want to look at the billionaires, we have some really good examples. The headline I think you read is it was a nonprofit funded by billionaires is how they described AP. Fine, whatever. So we got billionaires that are funding a nonprofit, and we got billionaires who are just buying up ranches.
Right.
Go knock on some doors and see which one you get hunting access to.
Yeah.
Unless you got a big ass checkbook and a stack of $100 bills about that thick, they're going to say, sorry, there's the gate, get the hell out of here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So from a hunter standpoint, conservation standpoint, landscape standpoint.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people can sympathize with that multi-generation rancher, but it's just like, what's the alternative?
Right.
And there's no perfect future in a lot of instances.
Right.
And so for that, rural way of life, it's like, yeah, and I think it'll continue for a long time. It's not like it's going away anytime soon. It's still like the backbone of Montana's economy for sure. But it's just like, I don't know.
I feel
can't last forever, I guess, in a lot of those areas.
Well, it won't, and it's so much bigger.
Yeah.
The issues affecting the ag economy are so much more than American Prairie. But UPOM, back to when I said you can sell to your neighbor based on ag values, or you can sell to a billionaire, through their messaging, through the bills they try to get introduced, they're trying to say, oh, Joe and Mary, you've worked your asses off forever, but you got to sell at ag values.
Right.
Joe and Mary should get whatever the maximum they can get out of it.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I think you can take the analogy of like the housing market too. It's like, okay, you're going to sell your house, like someone's going to come in and give you $500,000, and it's like, well, this poor kid out of college can only afford $200,000. Are you gonna take a $300,000 loss because you feel bad? Like most people are not.
That's a
and
good
it's just
analogy.
like, what do you do? I mean, I don't know. There's no.
Well, from a bigger picture, I'm gonna try to calm down a little bit here, and I have no problem with any group, UPOM, PERC, AP, whatever they want to do, that's what they're gonna do. But the hypocrisy of this whole thing is the one that's hard for me to swallow.
Yeah.
And I worry that we are allowing a festering of opposition to private land conservation.
Yes.
And I have said many times, the low-hanging fruit has always been conservation on public lands. Okay, we can do that without having to get some landowner's permission. An agency, Congress can say, this is what we're doing. Well, in a lot of the West, the critical migration routes, the critical wintering habitat is private land. So we're going to have to be thinking about what are the examples, what are the new ideas that are going to allow for conservation on private land. Mm-hmm. And I don't want any of this stuff to be stifling that. There's going to be some experiments we try that fail. Mm-hmm. But some of them are going to be big successes.
Yeah.
And some of these groups and their policies and their puppet legislators are getting in the way of private land conservation.
Yeah, I think the future of private land conservation is going to be really interesting.
It is.
We've heard some other people are coming up with some new ideas that are in their infancy, so that's, who knows what the future holds, but there's a lot of work going towards it. And and a lot of pushback. So it's just going to be an interesting path going forward.
And so I would challenge UPOM and others promoting this message. What is your alternative? Yeah. What is your solution to let Joe and Mary maximize their retirement fund and keep the ag economy going, other than just blaming everything on a nonprofit?
Yeah.
Show me what you're doing. And I look really hard for this stuff, I can't find what they're doing. But maybe they are. I don't know. But I all of my empathy, sympathy, whatever you want to call it, is with that working landowner. I mean, they have busted their you-know-what for years, for generations and decades. And ag policy in the United States, this same discussion is going on in the Midwest, mm-hmm. where the little 160, 320 acre corn farmer, soybean farmer, he can't make it. So he's getting bought out by the conglomerate. And this is just a function of the bigger picture of agriculture policy in the United States. But if UPOM can keep raising donations and memberships by making, everyone's got to have a boogeyman, right?
Yeah.
And maybe AP is going to someday prove to be a boogeyman. But right now, they're just a willing buyer working with a willing seller. And then it's their property. They have a mission. We're going to retain and improve historic systems, mm-hmm. natural systems.
No, I'll be curious to see what happens in the future because it seems to be a contentious topic. But
Yeah, I need some more coffee.
Yeah.
You're going to throw me off the deep dives from here on out.
no, that was great. I was just I'm just like, trying to stay
You're-
balanced,
you're
but it's
try-
awesome. Yeah, I'm with you, but I just
Well, what you ought to do is call the UPOM guys and have them come and sit in on your next date.
You should debate them. That would be good. Yeah.
I don't think they'd want to. It'd be a real interesting discussion probably, but I hope that everybody listening, we're all dependent upon what happens on private land.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would encourage this audience to think about ways we can help private landowners, because them staying on the land means no subdivisions. You know, what's the old bumper sticker?
Cows not condos. Yeah.
It's, you know, and for my own purpose, I don't even care if I get to hunt that place. It doesn't matter to me. If that's a good working landowner who's contributing and keeping this place intact,
Yeah.
I'm going to line up with them a lot of times. That's where a lot of our wildlife spends part of their time in this country.
Oh, for
and
sure.
in this state.
Yeah.
So.
For sure. But yeah, I think we'll have to wrap it up. No,
Marcus is
I'm
holy crap, I didn't know he was going to go off the rails like this.
I'm with you. I get it. But yeah, if you want to let us know, give us your thoughts. You can email us weekly.
Marcus is going to forward all those emails to me.
It's in the description. Weekly at freshtracks.tv.
You're gonna put the
You can
link
email
down
us all of your thoughts about this. All right. Thanks for watching.